Good evening. Can I invite everyone to please take your seats? We're about to begin. And our panelists as well, please come join us up here on the stage. Good evening again, and welcome to Education in the Age of Innovation, to our panel this evening. My name is Aletta Margolis. I'm founder and executive director of Center for Inspired Teaching, and it's my pleasure to be your moderator here this evening to talk about a topic that's very, very important to me, innovation in education. As our panelists take their seats, I want to begin by thanking the sponsors of tonight's panel, the Knight Foundation, Greater Impact Foundation, George Mason University, and Marquette University. Thank you very much to all of our sponsors this evening. The definition of innovation is simply to do something better or differently than before. It's a simple definition, but a very, very challenging concept. My organization, Center for Inspired Teaching, a social change agency based here in DC, is building a better school experience for students through transformative teacher training. And we believe real innovation, genuine innovation, is long overdue in the public school system in our country. We're not the only ones who think so, as you might imagine. In fact, in 2006, Time magazine ran a front page article called How to Build a 21st Century Student, addressing the lack of innovation in our public schools, and it began this way. The opening paragraph of the story talks about Rip Van Winkle, you know, who fell asleep for 100 years? And this is what they say: Rip Van Winkle awakens in the 21st century after a 100-year sleep. And of course, he is utterly bewildered by what he sees. Men and women dash about, talking to small metal devices pinned to their ears. Young people sit at home on sofas, moving miniature athletes around on electronic screens. Older folks defy death and disability with metronomes in their chest and with hips made of metal and plastic. Airports, hospitals, shopping malls, every place Rip goes just baffles him. But finally, he finds a place that looks familiar. He walks into a school, and he knows exactly where he is. He walks into a classroom, and he says, "This is a school. We used to have these back in 1906. Only now the chalkboards are green." And that's the big change that he notices. That's his big change that he sees. So that was 6 years ago. Now it's 2012. He might see a few things differently if he went to visit a school today. He might see computers at the desks. He might see iPads. He might see Promethean boards. But what hasn't changed and what needs to change in education, if we want to teach our young people how to innovate, how to come up with better and more thoughtful approaches to solving problems, what needs to change is how we ask kids to spend their time during the day. Today, in most schools, as in 1906, very shortly after public school began in this country, students are asked to spend their time receiving information from a teacher who provides it. They're asked generally to be passive, to listen, to absorb, to hopefully remember, and then to show that they've learned it. And the teacher's job is to have the information and to provide it to the students. That doesn't teach kids to think and to innovate. And I'll give you an example of what's going on here in Washington, D.C., what school still too often is, and what it might be. I was in a school recently, a very good school, but a school where innovation still needs to happen, here in D.C., in a second grade classroom, and kids were learning how to tell time, which is one of the things you learn when you're in second grade. And the teacher had written on the board, 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day. The kids were writing that down, and indeed, you should know that information. That's important information. But they were not learning how to think. They were learning what to think. So across the city in another school, and this one I will shamelessly tell you is the Inspired Teaching Demonstration School, Center for Inspired Teaching opened up a charter school this year to show what we believe innovation ought to look like in schools and a kind of teaching and learning that we believe can and should happen in schools all across the country. So the Inspired Teaching School second grade classroom, also learning how to tell time. It's what they need to learn. Their teacher is playing the role of instigator of thought. He's not information provider, he's instigator of thought. So he's kind of making trouble, he's getting kids to think. And so he begins and he says, well, a minute. Okay, is a minute a long time or a short time? And the kids discuss and they have to state their belief. Well, I think it's long. Well, why? Give some proof, give some evidence. Well, actually, no, I disagree. I believe it's a short time. Give some proof, give some evidence. He says, okay, listens to the kids. Then he pulls out his stopwatch. He says, okay, everybody, I'm going to set my watch for a minute. And when I say go, everybody hold your breath for a minute. Go. Right? And then they try to hold their breath as long as they can for a minute. And fortunately, they don't quite get to the end of the minute. But when the time is up, he says, okay, now, is a minute a long time or a short time? And again, many students have now changed their answer, but they present their arguments, they give evidence for why they have their answer. He says, great. He asks the question again, and this time he says, all right, everybody needs to clean out your desk. Needs to be, and you know what second graders' desks, you may know what they look like or remember in your own experience. So he says, you got to clean out your desk. It's got to be perfectly organized, perfectly cleaned out. You've got 1 minute, go. And he hits the stopwatch. So again, at the end of the minute, is a minute a long time or a short time, and they need to debate and give evidence. So these students are indeed learning that there are 60 seconds in a minute and other important information they need to know, but they're learning how to think because their teacher's playing the role of an instigator of thought, not an information provider. Technology is a critical tool in schools if it supports kids learning how to think. If it replaces the delivery model of instruction where kids sit passively and receive, technology is not truly a form of innovation. But if it helps to build students' thinking skills and teachers in the role of instigator of thought, then indeed it is a powerful tool. And I believe that the way we should assess student learning to find out if they're learning how to think is what in Inspired Teaching we call our 4 I's: intellect, inquiry, imagination, and integrity. That we want to look at student learning on those 4 levels, really looking for innovation in teaching and in how we ask kids to spend their time in the classroom. And if we can do that, then we have some real change in schools, and we really are preparing students to be innovators, to be problem solvers, to be positive contributors. And now we'll hear from our distinguished panelists more on this very important topic of innovation in education. I will first tell you who they are. We begin to my immediate left with Bill Drayton. He's been a social entrepreneur all his life. As an undergraduate at Harvard, inspired by civil rights work and asking himself, what can I do? He founded the Ashoka Table, which today has grown into an international organization celebrating and supporting social innovation around the world. And I'm proud to tell you that I'm also an Ashoka Fellow, and it has been a tremendous opportunity for me to learn and grow my work being part of this incredible community. Mr. Drayton has worked as a consultant for McKinsey, as assistant administrator at the EPA. He's served in the White House and taught law and management at Stanford Law School and Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. In honor of his work, Mr. Drayton was elected one of the early MacArthur Fellows. And in 2005, he was selected as one of America's best leaders by U.S. News and World Report and Harvard's Center for Public Leadership. Our next panelist is Undersecretary Martha Cantor. She's Undersecretary of Education in the U.S. Department of Education, and she oversees policies and programs related to post-secondary education, adult and career technical education, and federal student aid. Previously, Undersecretary Cantor was Chancellor of the Foothill de Anza Community College District, and she is the first community college leader to serve in the undersecretary position. Her work has been widely recognized, and in 2011, she was appointed to the U.S. National Commission for UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, Cultural Organization. Undersecretary Cantor holds a doctorate from the University of San Francisco. She received her master's degree in education from Harvard University and a bachelor's degree from Brandeis University. And finally, Dr. Angel Cabrera was named the 6th president of George Mason University, on July 1st of this year. So this is his 26th day as president of GMU. And we have him here with us tonight, which is a wonderful thing. President Cabrera's expertise in international business and higher education has been recognized by top internal organizations, including the Clinton Global Initiative and the United Nations. During the last decade, he has pioneered efforts to support women entrepreneurs in emerging markets and to establish a code of conduct for business leaders. His latest book, Being Global: How to Think, Act, and Lead in a Transformed World, was published by the Harvard Business Review. A native of Spain, Dr. Cabrera earned a PhD and MS from Georgia Institute of Technology, which he attended as a Fulbright Scholar, and a BS and MS in engineering from Madrid Polytechnical University. So we have a wonderful group of panelists this evening joining us. And I'll come join you over here. This question is for all three of you. And it talks about education and innovation. As we enter an age where innovation is the key driving force for social change, how can we prepare society? What does education for innovation look like, and how do we get there? Bill, you want to start us off?
Well, first of all, this is a remarkable community, a self-selecting community of people who are anti-Rip Van Winkles. And all of us sense, we know that this is a very historic turning point. We have a huge opportunity to really change the world, and working together across all the different institutions that are here. The universities, and Ashoka, you are a very important part of this. So what I hope I can do is help us get a little bit sharper about how do we have the biggest impact, and then go into what are the next steps. So it's very helpful to think about 3 different levels of work, have different types of impact. Direct service, how many students are in this class, and how many students do you graduate? Absolutely necessary. The next level is systems change. So here we have a systems changer. The 3,000 Ashoka Fellows meet that criterion. Over half have changed national policy within 5 years of their launch, and 3/4 the pattern in their field. Now, almost everyone here, I think, knows Mary Gordon. For any of you who don't, she saw this problem that more and more children, starting in her class, but more broadly, could only respond to another child who made them uncomfortable with aggression. That invites aggression back. And she said, I'm going to change this picture. She gave herself permission. So with the aid of an infant 2 to 4 months old at the beginning of the school year with a visit monthly, she has shown how children who have not gotten empathetic skill at home, street, or school can grasp it. And bullying rates come and stay down. She's now in 10 countries. Well, there are 700 out of the 3,000 fellows focused on children and young people, and more who are not primarily focused, but rural development. Of course, you're dealing with young people. So systems change is magical in one's ability to have a much bigger impact. Framework change is the ultimately most powerful way of changing the world. 150 years ago, Charles Darwin helped us all see humans and how we relate to the world very differently. Some people still resist this, but that was framework change. And we now live at a moment where the reality of the world is changing, so that we actually have to have our mental framework catch up. And so let me just describe that reality quickly. Throughout all of prehistory and history, there's been some change, evolutionary change, but basically human life has been about repetition. And so education and parenting and growing up was about mastering a body of knowledge and a set of rules, and then you could just repeat that as a baker or a banker or whatever. We organized for efficiency and repetition. Think assembly line, law firm. And that's basically how we've run ourselves forever. There's a teeny little problem. Both those systems are breaking down because, especially since 1700, when business started the everyone a change maker revolution and said, anyone with a better idea, you make it happen, we're going to make you rich and respected, and we're going to copy you. And so the rate of change, which was rate of growth in per capita income in the West from Rome to the 1700 was 0, then 2,200 and 740% in the next 3 centuries. Those curves, the rate of change, the number of change makers, the combinations of change makers, they're all mathematically exponential. That is a force we can't stop, we don't want to stop, but it means that the old definition of education and the old way organized is falling apart. There's a reason only 20% of the Fortune 500 of 40 years ago still exist. When you organize for efficient repetition and the world changes faster and faster, you go out of business. So we have to have a different definition. Once you change that big framework, then you have got to change the framework for education and the framework for organizing. So instead of only knowledge, which knowledge is still important, its half-life shrinks every year. A friend who runs a technical college in India discovered last year that half of what they teach in the first year is obsolete by the 4th year. But aside from that problem, the faster the world moves, the less the rules cover. And you cannot be a good person no matter how hard you try by following the rules. You're going to hurt people and you're going to disrupt groups and you're gone, finished, marginalized, and ditto your group if the group doesn't have those skills. And so we have learned that the skill of empathy, which is very complicated. You've got to observe yourself, observing all the people around you, layers out and into the future and in all sorts of group contexts, and understand who that person is, who those people are, and then guide your thinking and what you say and do. This is not genetic. You have to learn it. You have to practice it. And without it, you can't use the knowledge. So every child must master empathy. And every human being has to continuously get better and better at empathy because the level of skill required keeps getting higher. It's no longer a matter of learning something, even a skill like this, and then that's it. Similarly, we've learned that the old institution for repetition doesn't work. You need a fluid, open team of teams, because the world is always changing and you've got to be changing to serve it. Well, to do that, a team means everyone has to be a player, and of course there's repetition in this world, but the value increasingly is in contributing to change. So you better be a change maker if you want to be a player. This is a different game. There's still lots of jobs for repetition. There won't be in 10 or 15 years because people can't afford that. Now, I have just described 3 frame changes. The big one, we're moving to an everyone a change maker world. It's already happening. This is a different framework for education. It's a different framework for how we organize. Now, universities play a very key role here. Opportunity to understand, to articulate, to help people master this. Let me just take the example of every child must master empathy. We're working with a group of schools, with a group of fellows, with a series of publishers and writers coming together, and with Ashoka U, with the self-selecting educators who want to make a difference. There are already 2 schools of education, one of them one of our hosts, that is moving in this direction to change what's going on in their ed school. If you're a president, you've got to deal not only with students, but you've got the community, you've got the alumni, the faculty, the staff. You can help every one of those constituencies with this framework change.
Bill, we have one more minute with
Okay,
apology.
okay.
for
I will, so it's in the interest of the university, it's in the interest of all of us to get this across. Same thing for organization. Last point, when we say everyone, we really do mean everyone. Every child, every human being. It is not enough to mentally say everyone, meaning the 1%, us. And this is one of the things that the Undersecretary has made her life on, is to broaden that out. But this is, you can't have an everyone a change maker America if we don't have everyone with these skills. Without that, we are on a one-way express ticket to Detroit. It took 50 years for the top of our technology, pride, and wealth to hit the bottom. We don't have that, maybe 10 or 15 years. And how can we possibly be a good society, a fair society, unless everyone is a change maker, let alone one that can compete in the world? So framework change is profoundly important, and I am very grateful to everyone, all the different communities here, for working on this.
Thank you. Undersecretary Cantor.
Thank you.
So I have a very hard act to follow, as you might imagine, but I'll do my best. The first thing, I think your remarks, Bill, took me back to a talk I gave when I was named president in 1993. And I wrote this paper on leadership, and I had 3 principles that really tie into what you're talking about. And the first was that leadership rests in the empowerment of others, which really, I think, captures the value of empathy and the importance of having an empowerment framework that really can be embedded in organizations and in classrooms and in relationships. And then the second thing I said to them was, this is sort of not in my, I always prepare remarks and then I always deviate from them, so I apologize. But the second thing I said was that leadership must exist at all levels of any organization. And so I used the example of the person that took care of the grounds on campus and how that was often the first contact a student came, when a student was seeking higher education. And, what was that person's role, and if that person, we had a large Latino population, wanted to really put an education system in place in the organization so that people could access education as they were teaching or learning or serving in the organization. And the third one was more simply, and I think all of you are sort of evidence of this, everyone can and should be a leader. And goodness knows in this country, and now having spent 3 years in Washington, coming from a pretty innovative place, Silicon Valley in California, those principles really are hard to find. And I'll just use the example of the frustration that I feel pretty much every day about why this Congress cannot work together on some fundamental things that need to get done. And no matter what administration, we've got to get to a place where our government is really serving the people. And, it's just very frustrating. So, we were asked to talk about innovation. I have maybe 5 minutes, and I'll just sort of touch on some points that I've thought about and talk a little bit about what we've done. My first worry about all of this is that, we're in an age of intensity and innovations happening everywhere. And, if you're my age, if you're over 60, you really feel like you can't keep up with things. And you do your damn best to try to focus on the things you can do and really feel that you're making a difference in your sort of sphere of life. And so where all the innovative ideas are happening pretty much everywhere, and, we talk about higher education or K-12, and you talk about these schools. I've gone around the country. There are what I call islands of excellence in every single state. And I can point to them, and some of them are charter schools, and some of them are public schools, and some of them have, I mean, I was just at Montana State in Bozeman last Sunday, and, you know, they're growing in their graduation success rates 6% a year. They're the best in the country. And I was talking to Dr. Cruzado, who's a young president, someone that I'm sure you'll meet. And I said, what did you do here? You've only been here for a couple of years. And she said, you know, we've totally refocused the entire institution on serving everyone, and we've redesigned pretty much everything so that the student who comes here is going to have to be in a network right away. They're going to have mentors. They're going to have guidance from faculty. They're going to have a very intensive experience. They may have part of it online. They may have part of it in person, but we are intentionally redesigning how we're thinking about student achievement and what responsibility and what skills and knowledge and cognitive abilities we can impart in these students over the course of their time with us. And it was really, really impressive. And so there are these islands of excellence, and it's frustrating. I think the challenge of government is to take those islands and see what of them really have the evidence. You know, we're really into randomized control studies, okay? They take 3 to 5 years. I'm not sure that's going to work as well as what I see Salman Khan doing, where he has 5 million users and he can get feedback in a very organized way using back-end analytics and make change in the courses and the delivery of the knowledge and the actual impact on students and study, where students are stopping out, what students are learning, how are things going. You know, we've got to apply that to schools in a very deep and thoughtful way. My worry is that we get swept up in a lot of the innovation and we don't have the evidence and research isn't moving fast enough to really fix this exponential increase in the amount of information and all the things that are happening. So I think that's going to be a real challenge for us as a country, as a world. How are we going to find evidence and believe that evidence really has integrity and it's not just the new thing that is going to pan out to be not very good after all, because that is a real worry to me. So I just wanted to sort of frame those few thoughts. I'll tell you what's possible in education. I hoped this was possible, and I'll just use one example of, I was talking to Bill before we came in about a relationship we built in my first 6 months with the Internal Revenue Service. And you might think that's kind of strange, the Department of Education working with the Internal Revenue Service, but I have to sing their praises. And the idea was, could we simplify, my MOU is Albert Einstein, things should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler, especially if I have a job in government now for the last couple of years. So could we, for example, dramatically increase the number of low-income students in college in my term of office by working with the IRS to use information that the government already had? So what we did was formed a relationship with them. We empathized with them. We really tried to understand what their system looked like and what our system looked like of delivering aid to students to be able to attend college and to be able to make it easier for families, especially families with low levels of financial literacy. And I'll just give you one little statistic that worries me very much. 47% of American adults are not reading at a college career-ready level. Okay? So we think we're the greatest and best in the world, but we have very similar problems to many of the developing countries, which is what we need to work on for this country. And what we talk about are all the people who do well. What we worry about, and what I worry about every day, is all the people who don't, and how can we get them in. So with this example of the IRS, we were able to really simplify using some technology, using some skip logic, to be able to port in information protecting privacy that the government already had when students applied for federal aid, get a response back. Simplify used to take an hour to apply. It takes 20 minutes now. And I think, you know, in the months ahead, the idea will be, we don't need a form. We don't need an application. The government should just tell you you qualify, and here's how you get into the system, and here's what you can do. And I think you would, as a president, be very happy if we took that bureaucracy out of things. The result of just doing that, and also doing another thing that was a second treatment, was actually looking at the system and looking at the framework of delivering federal aid. And mind you, we have 30 million people who are now paying loans that went to college over time. We've educated over 60 million in 40 years who took advantage of a Pell Grant to go to college. Used to be, in 1972, it paid for 2/3 or all of a college education. It pays for less than 30% now. That's how fast the cost of college has risen. And so what we did there was we said, could we get the Treasury with the IRS to actually deliver a check to the student without going through the banks and lenders? And that was hell to pay my first year and a half, but I'm happy to say that it's working really smoothly at all the colleges and universities. And what has happened because of these two things is that we have had a 50% increase in the number of low-income families in college today. We've added 3.5 million students to the 6 million we had 3 years ago. So,
Dr. Finney, with one more minute.
yeah, so in my last minute, I will say I'm very confident that with systems thinking and understanding the framework and building the kinds of relationships, you call it empathy, Bill, that we can have the leadership to do much better than we've done for the last couple generations that are still alive in this country. And I'm hoping that we could see this kind of growth. We've doubled the number of people who are earning less than $10,000 into college. And I know very well from a student I just wrote about that her son, who's 5 years old, is going to get a really good education. So we're changing generations in this work, and I'll just close with the fact that the challenge ahead is that 1/3 of children in this country are not ready for kindergarten. We're losing 25% of students who don't graduate from high school. In some urban and rural areas in the country, 50%. And in college, we're losing 40% over 6 years. So we're not going to be that successful society unless we reinvent what we're doing in education at all levels. And just very happy to learn from you and hear about what you're doing and share and be a partner, as the president has asked, that we really think about what he calls shared responsibility in this work. Thank you.
Thank you. President Cabrera.
I will share with you my extensive experience of 27 days as a university president. As I was preparing some thoughts for today, I went to the oracle of all oracles, that's Wikipedia, to find out which one is the oldest university in the world. And what's interesting is the Wikipedia police has put a little banner on top of that article saying this article is under investigation, and you have to be warned that until the dispute is resolved, you should not trust what it says here, because all universities that appear there continuously are going into the article and manipulating it to put their university at the top. And they found some document that says, no, my university is older than your university. So, and I think that banner by the Wikipedia police will continue. I don't think it's going to go away. So it's a very peculiar type of institution where actually we take so much pride in how old we are. So depending on how you look at it, it's about 900-year-old invention, this thing about a modern university. And I've looked at some of the old documents of what an old university looked like. So forget about the 100 years of your story. If you look at drawings of the universities 800 years ago, it's pretty much, they look a lot like universities today. Back then they make more sense, because back then the scarce resource was something called the book. And you were lucky if you had a book. And when you have a book, what do you do with it? You have some individual called a reader or a lecturer that actually reads the book for other people to take notes and learn from it. So actually, that invention was quite revolutionary back then. So I am now trying to figure out, I'm on my listening tour as a new president, so I try to spend as much time as I can with knowledgeable people, and even in sessions like today, just listening to Bill, the way he thinks about the new challenges. Hey, it's not just about repetition. It's not about observing information. We need change makers. In fact, he's throwing us this big challenge. Everybody should be a change maker. All right. How do we deal with that? I listened to the administration where we want to multiply the number of graduates. We need to do a lot better in terms of to increase the nation's competitiveness, and we need to multiply the numbers. The magnitude of these challenges is tremendous. Just to give you an idea, George Mason University is the largest university in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We have about 33,000 students. About 40 years ago, we had 7,000. The growth pattern of George Mason going from a small satellite of the University of Virginia to a small commuter school to a very complex, comprehensive university in just 40 years has been phenomenal. And people look at Mason as an example of growth and innovation and so forth. And yet, when you look at the size of the challenge, even that has come short. Let me throw some numbers at you. If you take India, let's say you're the government of India, and you have as one of your policy goals to increase participation in tertiary education by 1% point. Okay, I'm not going to have huge goals. We don't want to double. Just increase by 1% goal. To do that, you need to make room for 17 million new students. You need 500 George Masons in 40 years, by the way, to move the needle 1% point. And that's the magnitude of the challenge we're dealing with. How in the world do you do that? And that's just take one place, just take India, and you can start adding in terms of the magnitude of just the inclusion piece, let alone dealing with the challenge of that Bill poses, which is, and by the way, what you need to do in the universities is a lot more complex and more difficult than what we used to do. All we know is that the old model won't do it. I mean, there's absolutely no way that a place like India, a place like China can meet the magnitude of that challenge by trying to replicate the old model. So I keep thinking, why are we so darn difficult to change? Because honestly, at universities, traditionally, we define innovation in the following way. Innovation is, so we produce ideas that question every belief, that question every institution, as long as it's outside of the walls of our university, right? In terms of how we run our own business, we're fine, thank you very much. Why is it so incredibly difficult to bring innovation into the university? Well, one of the reasons is that it's worked great. I mean, if you pick this country, in fact, I've done this. I've sort of run a correlation between the number of world-class universities a country have per capita and its GDP growth, competitiveness according to the World Economic Forum, whatever you put on the other axis, and the correlation is phenomenal. The more world-class universities you have, according to any ranking, the better your competitiveness is. And in that graph, the U.S. is pretty high on both. And the U.S., in fact, has built in the last 50 years the most successful system of higher education in the world, and somehow everybody wants to copy it. The problem is our universities, as successful as they have been in meeting the goals and the challenges we had when those universities were built, are not the solution for the magnitude and the intensity of the problems that we have in front of us. So interestingly, the seeds of change and the ideas are there. I mean, in a place like George Mason alone, in 27 days, I'll tell you, a day doesn't go by when I find somebody working at the university that is doing something like, wow. And yet, what's incredibly hard is to see how these seeds of change, these wonderful ideas can scale and can really begin to transform the system. There are great examples, but it's very hard to see how they can transform the system. I mean, even research, just to give you an example that involves Ashoka and George Mason and Phil, who's taking a nap in the front row. I caught you. Noted. All of a sudden, sort of, you take a thought leader from a university with an organization like Ashoka. They use the tools of basically freely available tools of social media and interaction. They put together I guess we call them now MOOCs. It's an awful acronym you'll hear around. Is massive online open course. And they brought together a community of what, like 500-600 people from around the world, a community of interests, a community of aspirations and goals, a community of learning that comes together through a span of a few weeks to learn something together. And somehow this happens outside of the walls of a university, and just people convene together and then learn together and then they disband. So it is amazing the amount of things that are being tried. And I have concluded that it's going to be through the work of entrepreneurs, not only social entrepreneurs. There will be social entrepreneurs, there will be business entrepreneurs. And in fact, some of the most revolutionary solutions that are being tried that at least intrigue me and call my attention come from even profit-making entities. Some solutions maybe even come from policy entrepreneurs, but it's going to be through the work of entrepreneurs that the traditional model of universities is going to be questioned. And here's the good news. The good news is, for change, actually most of my colleagues will not recognize this as good news, is that traditional universities, we're hurting. We're under big pressure. We're seeing our income from, especially public universities, we're seeing our income from state appropriations decline steadily over the last 15 years. We've probably lost over more than 20% of the per student appropriation. The costs have increased tremendously, and we've been putting all the pressure in tuition. That was the only way to kind of make up for the difference, and now society and government and everybody's saying, stop it, enough, you cannot do that. And that's, of course, you wouldn't expect otherwise. And we're now pinched in the middle saying, game over, now what? So that which actually for those of us in university feels mostly like bad news because it hurts, that's going to have the positive outcome that is going to be the force that is going to force us to find those gems of innovation within our own walls. They're there. They exist all over the place, and trying to find ways to help them grow, help them scale, and perhaps find new models of dealing with those challenges. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it is time for the lightning round of the panel, where each panelist has exactly 30 seconds to respond to this question. It's going to be good.
Uh-oh.
What skill sets and mindsets are indispensable in the age of innovation? So what do we need to be able to do in order to thrive in the age of innovation? And Dr. Cabrera, you get the great opportunity to go first on this one. And we'll just go right down the line. You got 30 seconds. What are the skill sets and mindsets we need?
Being able to connect with people who are different from yourself.
Thank you.
How about that for conciseness?
That's beautiful. Undersecretary Cantor.
I would say critical thinking and a sense of ethics and understanding of ethical behavior.
Both of the above, plus giving yourself permission to see the world differently and to change it.
Thank you. How about that? That was wonderful.
Very disciplined.
And I would add, if I can sneak in my own, the ability to teach yourself, I think is very important. So we have a few moments for questions from the audience. We'd love to hear from you if you have questions either for one or for several of our panelists. We have microphones coming around. Raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question.
Just a quick comment about the Carnegie Foundation is doing some very interesting middle ground improvement the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching in terms of solving this research problem in terms of doing improvement research, where the turnaround time is something more like 9 months rather than 5 years. So just the thought that there might be some middle ground to find.
We have a question over here. We can hear you, I bet, if you want to just tell us.
I'm curious about the history of tenure as well, if that's 800 years old, and what you think the implications are for the institution of tenure in an age of innovation.
Yeah, I'll take it. You're talking to someone that gave up tenure 3 times in her career. So I think tenure is very important if people don't respect the diversity of ideas and unpopular opinions. But I do think that, and I'm not a lawyer, but the legal, there are so many protections now that we didn't have 30, 40, 50 years ago for having unpopular opinions that might actually change the way we do things or the way we think or how things could be better or worse for that matter. So I'm somebody that thinks that probably over time, tenure won't be as critical as it is now, but people are hanging on to tenure because they don't have a sense of security. And I think it's actually a false sense of security. But I think our job is to help people feel secure, and that's one thing that Japan has done so well. That when I study different cultures and I think about, what is it that will give people the confidence that they will have meaningful work throughout their lifetime. And how do we handle this terribly tough economic time where people will hold on to old structures because it will give them a sense of security that they need. So I sort of see it sort of 2 ways. There are schools now, many K-12 schools and colleges and universities that don't have tenure. There are states that don't have tenure. There are states that do. And I think it's going to be something that we're going to have to rethink like everything else in education.
Anyone else want to comment?
I was tempted to, but I think if I want a decent longevity in my job,
We understand. We'll bring you back next year and then we can try again.
no, I don't think is the main tenure does play a role. Tenure does play a role. We have and we need university professors to have an independent voice. We need them to raise red flags, to call things, to enrich the dialogue, and there are many pressures, many related even to philanthropy, where administrators may be tempted to perhaps amplify some voices or hide others for the sake of the financial well-being of an institution. So there is a role for tenure in terms of protection of the intellectual independence of thought leaders. But even though that was the theory and the goal of the tenure system, that's sort of the official rationale behind it. In practice, it also has lots of perverse effects in universities, and I think honestly, I mean, part of the some of the wealth that universities like ours enjoys is that you have a combination of folks who enjoy tenure, and maybe some of them really are protected in their intellectual endeavor for it, with a wealth of individuals who don't have it, don't care for it, and just enrich the life of a university like ours, where you have folks who are involved in incredible activities in the Washington, D.C. area and come through our classrooms and so forth. But honestly, I don't think, at least in higher ed, that is right now the least of my concerns.
We have other, yeah, please.
Thank you. My name is Jamal Abdulalim. I'm a reporter with diverse issues in higher education. I'd be interested in getting perspective from Mr. Drayton and Cabrera about the college completion agenda that's being promoted by the Obama administration as well as philanthropic organizations. As I'm sure you're aware, the goal is to have the United States become the most college-educated nation in the world by the year 2020. And implicit in that are some assumptions that if we reach that goal, things will be so much better. I'd be interested in getting some perspective from you on, if you had a chance to refine that goal, kind of make it a little bit more nuanced, go beyond numbers. How would you go about doing that?
You go first.
Okay.
Well, that was the order he suggested.
Access is obviously really important, but I'm afraid a large part of our discussion is about access to a system that hasn't changed. And as I was saying earlier, we really need to do something very different at all levels. If it's access to a system that's giving technical skills or even more broad knowledge, and it's not dealing with the human skills, empathy, teamwork, a type of leadership that's appropriate for a fluid team of teams where everyone is a leader, very different from the old leadership. Change making, I just worry that we're having a distressingly irrelevant kind of, not irrelevant because it is important to get knowledge, but we're missing the point and we're missing the opportunity. So the other thing I'm uncomfortable about comparisons with the rest of the world. I think it's absolutely terrific that we have the level of education going on in India today. It's a big change. In Indonesia, it's an explosion of education. And it's a large part of it's driven by people who really want it for their children, and they're making it happen. So I think we should celebrate the fact that we're less ahead, but I'm afraid if we continue to play the game of knowledge and rules, access to that isn't going to help.
Yeah, my only addition to that is I recently ran into a statistic that I guess it shouldn't have surprised me, but it did, which is we all have this image in our minds of an undergraduate student, someone who leaves home and spends 4 years living on some normally decent-looking campus and having profound conversations with faculty that they come across in the hallways and that kind of. There's about 15% of undergraduate students that meet that imagery of what we consider to be the sort of the prototype of an undergraduate student. The other 85% are doing something else. They're attending community college. They're working and studying. They're part-time. They study in evenings. They take classes in online. They attend for-profit colleges. They do all sorts of things. I guess some of the numbers that I gave earlier, I think demonstrate that to meet those numbers, they're absolutely, I think they'll be very hard to accomplish if based on a traditional solution of undergraduate education. And I think only if we start not only allowing for, but even encouraging diversity of solutions, of models, we're going to be able to approach that goal.
Thank you to our panelists. As we close up the panel, I'll ask you each in another 30 seconds apiece as to give us a closing statement. If you had one wish for the future, we're focused on education in the age of innovation, and you want to say, 5 years from now, this has happened. We really have moved into the age of innovation. We've done something right. What would you like to be able to say has happened looking forward? We'll start with whoever would like to go first on this one.
This time you go first.
Oh, that's a good point, yeah.
Okay. Well, I would say that, you said in 5 years?
Yeah, 5 years.
In 5 years, we would not have 1/3 of children 0 to 6 not ready for kindergarten, that every child in this country would be ready for kindergarten. That would change the lifespan of what we're going to see as an educated society.
Um, 5 years. I would love to. I actually think I'm with Bill on this. I would love to see a way for, at least in the case of our university, to somehow figure out a way to meet Bill's challenge on the everybody's a change maker, and how can we really move in the world I live in the world of our university, move from that goal of the ability to perform a well-defined job to enabling people and giving the capacity to enact a change, a positive change. That would be my dream, yeah.
I hope that when we meet in 5 years, we will all be able to say that everyone here made a big contribution so that every parent, when the 6-year-old hits the 4-year-old, doesn't just do the rules and enforcement, but says, well, how did you feel? How do you think your little brother felt when that happened? And when a 15-year-old comes and says, boy, this is a mess, you put down whatever you're doing, and you realize you have one of those rare moments, and you should be able to say, well, why don't you get your friends together and you go and fix it? Me? Yes, you can do this. And by the way, this is the most important thing you can do, because if you are a change maker at 15, you'll be a change maker for life. You'll have those skills. That's the evidence of frame change. And of course, if parents are doing that, the schools will have figured it out. And that should also apply for colleges and workplaces, because every place that there's a human being needs to encourage all the human beings in those places to continuously get better and better at being people who are able to express love and respect in action at the highest possible level, which is what we all want to do.
Thank you all, and thank you to our audience. And that concludes our panel. The reception is going on in the room right next door.